Hi, Naveen. How are you? Naveen, you have to unmute yourself for us to hear you. Can you guys hear Naveen? If you can hear him, we're going to try again, Naveen. I'm going to move you down to come back up. All right, let's see. Tesla is flat, $196 per share. Rivian, it dropped 7% in the morning and now up to only down 1.8%. Nick, how are you?
Hey, good morning, Yaman. Or
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you. Good morning to me.
Yeah, how's it going?
Pretty good. Pretty good. Just finished up a little range, working on the golf swing. You know, trying to stay ahead.
Well, that's very good. Naveen, how are you? Nick, can you hear Naveen?
Doesn't sound like he's doing too good.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, we're not doing that. Any questions, comments? Please request to speak. Hey, Nick, what did you think of the Rivian announcement today? They pre-announced their production delivery numbers.
Okay. Can you tell me more? I'm just catching up.
Hi, everyone. Am I audible?
Man, rough start. Rough start today.
Jeez Louise.
We have Larry in the audience. If he wants to come up and chat, we can do that.
Hey, Yaman, what are the Rivian numbers?
Yeah, Rivian, let's pull it up. This is on YouTube. If you go to my profile, on your screens, Rivian pre-announced Q2 results. Production 9,100 to 9,300 versus expected 10,300. Deliveries are higher, 13,000 plus versus expected 10,200. So they're delivering about 4,000 more than produced. Larry, how are you? What do you think about these Rivian pre-announcements?
Well, I don't think they're moving the ball forward. I think they may make a lot of people happier, but they're kind of mixed. You know, Rivian's got a long road to hoe. They've got a very tough financial situation. This Volkswagen deal is not a life-saving deal. It is a, potential life-saving deal. But Rivian are going to run out of string very quickly now by these numbers. So they're going to have to step up deliveries. They're going to have to bring down their costs. They're promising to bring down costs. They say next quarter is going to get a lot better. And if it does, it's going to have to get a lot better still for them to make it before their money runs out. Now, it's possible that there will be more money to come. But, these OEM deals have been the kiss of death so far to most of the large companies. And so I'm not sure that this very, very short piece of string with the promise of much string to come from a company like Volkswagen is the elixir, the magic elixir that'll get them out of the trouble. They've got more to come. So I'm hopeful that they will find, that longer piece of string. I'm hopeful they will continue to improve, but this is not the answer. And their news, while better, is not great because their production definitely is falling short, and it's going to have to get long before it gets better. So I don't know if that helps, but that's just my view.
Thank you, Larry. Jimmy, go ahead.
Yeah, I was actually going to add on to that. This isn't like a 100% deal. Like VW can pull out of this at any time. And again, Larry mentioned, we've seen this happen before, and this is kind of like the nail in the coffin. When the companies start doing this, they start reaching out to everybody to try to stop their bleeding, but you need to stop the bleeding internally. You can't extend it out you can't do what you're doing.
Larry, what percent probability do you assign to Rivian surviving to ramp R2? He just said the connection issue. All right. Well, I mean, the most interesting part of this whole pre-announcement is that they are reaffirming their Q4 gross profit guidance. They maintain their production guidance of 57,000. And I listened to their Investor Day presentation. They shared more details around how they expect to get to reduce costs. But during the analyst question and answer session, I think the analysts dug a couple of holes in their assumptions. So I wish them the best. It doesn't look like, honestly, it doesn't look like they're gonna make it. But they're trying. They're trying hard. Lenny.
Good afternoon. Yeah, I think if they listen to what Elon recommended, have the engineers sleep on the factory floor, nonstop dedication. And I believe somebody in your space the other day mentioned, they need to not give so many options with their vehicles. I think somebody was saying there was like 15 different options that you could do on one specific vehicle. If they just drop that down, make it a easier product to order, then maybe it will help. But I wish them luck. I don't see so far going too much further.
Are you in the car right now? What are you doing?
Yeah, I'm driving home from work.
Are you going through are you like off-roading back home?
I live in the Northeast, so it's potholes all over my state.
I mean, you can avoid them if you try. Nick, are you in the car too?
I am in the car.
Am I the only one that's not in the car right now?
Do you want to get into a car?
Yeah, I would like a Tesla. Thank you.
All right, come outside.
Are you? Oh no. Are you really here?
Yeah, I'm in Philly. Come on.
All right. Well, I'll text you my exact location.
I'm looking at you.
No, you're not.
Are you wearing the Austin hat?
I am. So funny. It's a little creepy. Anyway, I can't believe it. I have to be attending to the live
What do you
stream.
think about Rivian? What do you think about Rivian's numbers? Do you think it's? I think it's good news, like for the quarter. I mean, good for them.
Well, it's going to make a few $100 million difference in terms of the free cash flow, but I don't think that's going to be enough. And then they don't expect to get to positive EBITDA, let alone net income, until 2027.
But positive gross margins Q4 still, right?
Positive gross margin Q4, they say, but it's really the operating margin that counts, and they don't expect to get to that until R2 ramps. And Colin, one of the analysts that usually is on the Tesla call, asked, well, I know you guys are going to drop the costs from R1 to R2, but the price also coming down, so don't you have to do even more than that? So, and then they say, well, we're going to improve costs on other fronts as well. And then Colin asks, well, can we get a number for those as well? And they're like, well, if you kind of do the back of the like if you go back, if you work backwards, then you can get to it. And like, well, you're kind of working from assumptions backwards, and that doesn't make any sense. So it doesn't look like they're basing on much. So let's see. I mean, let's see how this R1. The one takeaway I had from their presentation was they're trying to implement much of the cost savings from R1 to R2 in this production from R1 Gen 2 to R1 Gen 2. So I think that'll be interesting to see in the coming quarters. But, you know, let's see how they ramp this production of the Gen 2 vehicles. Larry, welcome back. Where'd you go?
I'm sorry, the DMV called and it interrupted this call. Anyway, they finally
You
acknowledged.
chose DMV over me. Larry.
Yeah, well, so just moving on. So did we resolve the Rivian situation?
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
That I want to talk about? I just want to tell you that I've come back from a trip to Florida in my Cybertruck. It was a great trip, except, oh my God, I'm missing FSD. You know, I drove for 3 months in Europe without FSD. And now this trip to Florida without FSD, it's killing me. It's just killing me. Need my FSD back. But other than that, not much. I'm just going to hang out with you guys.
Thank you. Jimmy is back too, I see. Jimmy, can you only be on the speaker board when Larry's on the speaker board? What's going on? Did you get a call from DMV as well?
I did get a call and then I disconnected.
Okay. Alex, welcome.
Hey, nice to see you, Larry. Long time.
Thanks very much. Great to see you.
Glad to bring you guys back together in this space. Alex, what's on your radar today?
Well, looking forward to the debate a little bit. But aside from that, nothing much.
You're going to watch on CNN?
Probably, well, online because I don't have cable. Been years since I've had cable, but I'll try to find somebody that's broadcasting it and watch it.
Did you watch Rivian's Investor Day?
No. I just read like was it yesterday or the day before yesterday? I was in your space and I looked at the agreement about the investment from VW and yeah, and then everybody commented. I think that's enough. And honestly, I don't want to be ripping on Rivian too much. You know, I like them. I like their products. I think that they might have a chance. They have to like execute really, really well. And I don't want to be one of those, you know, hating on Rivian, you know, just because it's not Tesla. So yeah, I want to give them their chance.
Okay. Larry, question for you. So last night I was asked a question and I don't feel like I did a great job answering it. But the question was, what makes you confident that Optimus is going to be the one that ramps to, you know, across the world, global scale, profitably, and is going to be the leading humanoid in the future? How would you answer that question?
It's a brilliant question. I think that it is the question that we should ask ourselves. I think Tesla has a good opportunity to be one of the leading companies. I don't say the leading company, but definitely an opportunity to be one of the leading companies for a couple of reasons. The one is they probably have deeper pockets than almost any of the other companies vying for the space. They really have a huge amount of asset behind them. Secondly, they have the proven engineering and AI skills. Engineering from the sense not only of designing and making the robot, but also the capacity to produce in very large volume. And, you know, we've been told many times by Elon, and it's been proven again and again as we watch other companies trying to enter the EV space that, you know, prototypes are easy, production is hard, scaling production is even harder, and large-scale production is the hardest of them all. So, you know, in that sense, Tesla have a very strong proven track record that most of the other companies vying for the space do not have. And then finally, they have really an important secret ingredient, and that's Elon Musk. Elon's engineering nous is absolutely undoubted now. He's been recognized as one of the greatest engineers in the world. He's a fellow of the Royal Society, and it's no accident that he's a fellow of the Royal Society, because he's got this proven track record of figuring out the right way forward in design from the perspective of large-scale production and also functionality. He's got a brilliant product sense. All of these are very important factors. And finally, the production, the key to production, economic production of the robot, apart from the AI factor, which is really a separate subject, and for which it's a given that that Tesla is one of the leading players in that field. But aside from that, the key to the success of the robot is the cost of the transducers. And Tesla have got an incredible depth of engineering skills in manufacturing motors, which is what a transducer is. So for all these reasons, I think that Tesla have got an outstanding opportunity to be one of the leaders in the field. Will it be the leader? I suspect there will not be a single leader. I suspect there will be many different robots that succeed very well, because the market is so large and the use cases so varied that we're going to see different leaders emerge in different spaces and with different specialities.
Yeah.
And
All right.
so that's my answer.
Thank you, Larry. Let me kind of ask others as well. Let's focus on Optimus today. Tesla is not getting any credits right now for Optimus potential, which I believe is larger than the robotaxi potential. So maybe we can build this understanding of what gives the questions at the top of your screens. If you'd like to answer the question, you can reply to the tweet at the top of your screens as well. There's a bunch of replies already there. You can read through the replies. Jeff, welcome. How are you?
Hey, good. How are you?
Good. Would you like to take a shot at this question that I miserably failed to answer in this space last night? What gives you confidence that Tesla will develop at scale Optimus before others can?
Yeah, I mean, and I know this, firsthand. There isn't a humanoid supply chain available, so it has to be created. And if you look at the players that are in the humanoid space, I haven't seen anybody besides Tesla that's actually created a supply chain from scratch. Tesla created the EV supply chain, and I haven't seen any of these other players demonstrate that acuity, or even the acuity of even the ability to copy a supply chain. I haven't seen any of these players actually do that at scale. So it's at the scale of what humanoids will be. The differentiating factors are going to be around AI, engineering control, and the capabilities of the robot and the supply chain. And it'll be a central battleground. That's actually what EV is turned into as well. It just doesn't get discussed widely because it's not a very sexy topic. But EV supply chain is, the ability to have a supply chain and produce the product at cost and design it for that cost is going to be the difference between success and failure in EV. That's why a lot of players have dropped out. So in humanoid, what's interesting about humanoid is, at least with EV, there was an auto supply chain, and a lot of the existing players thought that they could leverage their auto supply chain and then just pull out and insert electric motors and so forth, and take that old auto complexity and ramp EV. They realized when they swapped those modules out, those new modules were not at scale. They're much higher cost, and the integration costs were so much higher. So I don't
So someone will emerge, and I agree with Larry too. It's not going to be like Tesla's going to produce all the humanoids and no one's going to be able to produce anything. It's going to be similar to kind of like FSD, whereas number one, you've got to be able to get the performance of it to a certain level, and then you've got to be able to get power consumption and the engineering behind it, and like in this case, power consumption and the performance of the actuators. And then you're going to have a supply chain that can build it at scale. And I think when you put all these companies through that filter, you got to pass through one filter, you got to pass through the second filter, you got to pass through the third filter, and creating that supply chain. Tesla is going to have a pretty significant lead. They don't need to have 100% market share. They could have 20 or 30% market share and do very well.
All right. Omar, welcome. We have a very strong group of speakers today. It would be nice if we can focus on Optimus, specifically the question at the top, which I believe the market is trying to answer. The market needs an answer, a really good answer that makes sense, that it can kind of hang its hat on before it's going to give Tesla any credit for Optimus' future. So what do you think about this question? What's your answer to this question? And if the listeners want to answer the question, you can reply to the top at the top of your screens. You can reply to that and read through the others as well. There's a bunch of pretty good answers already, but I want to hear from this great panel of speakers today. Omar?
Well, the key to really making Optimus work is the brain. That's what's been missing. We've been pretty good on robotics hardware for a long time, but it's really required a lot of manual control, such that it's not that useful. And if it's not that useful because the software isn't good enough, then there isn't enough demand for the product. If there isn't enough demand for the product, then you can't achieve the economies of scale necessary to start driving the cost down. And so it's a little bit of a chicken and the egg situation. So the robot brain is what's missing. Now, nobody has actually demonstrated AI running in the real world, deep learning running in the real world that is reliable to the degree a humanoid robot would need to be. You don't want this thing falling over and running its head through the TV, kicking your kid in the face, it's cooking and it accidentally, starts a fire in your house or something. I mean, this is really a autonomy problem that's 10 times harder than the self-driving problem. So, self-driving problem, already the toughest computer science problem ever attempted. This is even more complex than that. And nobody's really demonstrated the ability to train an AI model like that, especially an AI model that can run locally on device and not on the server. Demonstrated the ability to do the silicon, the software, everything that Tesla has. So that's the primary thing is they've demonstrated the ability to make that robot brain and to push out a series of updates and improve it while maintaining safety. They've demonstrated a competence in that nobody else has demonstrated to that level. Then the second thing is manufacturing. In order to get the software to be really good, you need a lot of robots in the field trying things and being able to learn and improve that model over time. So you really need a great manufacturing capability. And Tesla, of course, has been one of the fastest growing manufacturers in the world. They've pioneered new techniques. They have a global factory footprint with locations in places like Shanghai, Germany, Silicon Valley. I mean, some of the most innovative places in the world. And they've got a manufacturing footprint there to make these things. They've talked about how they've designed many of the actuators themselves because what was on the market didn't really work. Of course, they know batteries, they know power electronics, they know safety. All of this is going to come in really handy. And to really get this to a point where an ordinary business user or an ordinary consumer sees it makes sense, you're going to need to see the cost be driven down over years. And that's exactly what Tesla's been doing in EVs. So, exact same formula they've been using for EVs, apply it to manufacturing the robot. And you want to get a really low cost robot that people can get into their house very easily. So it can't cost a ton to make. It can't cost $100,000 to make. And that's not only going to drive down the cost through economies of scale, it's actually going to make the software itself better and more reliable, which gives Tesla more of a moat. Ultimately, people are going to want to buy the robot that works well, and they're going to get frustrated by the one that doesn't work well, just like we see in other tech markets like phones, computers, social networks. And there is kind of potentially a network effect here where the company that's in the lead gets further in the lead because of the scale they have and being able to leverage that scale into actually offering a better software experience for the robot brain.
Interesting. It sounds like Alex agrees with you. Alex, what do you think about that potential for creating a network effect on Optimus?
Yeah, for sure. And just to bounce off what Jeff said earlier about supply chains, you got to remember Tesla started with, trying to get like off the shelf an off the shelf supply chain for its parts. And that was very difficult, but they managed to get through that. Then they started designing their own parts and creating their own supply chain of parts, of custom made parts. And then they started vertically integrating, making their own parts in-house. And all this expertise adds up and makes Tesla what it is today, like super competitive, whereas legacy automakers can compete. Now, as Elon mentioned, there is no off-the-shelf supply chain for humanoid robots. It just doesn't exist. But Tesla has the experience of creating its custom parts and also creating custom parts in-house. It's impossible to replicate for anybody else to replicate. So take whatever lead you think Tesla has on EVs, and then add what you have on robo taxis, and then you add a whole nother like years before people can catch up on Optimus. It's just not feasible. And of course, like everything, like the Apple ecosystem, like I have an iPhone, I have a MacBook. These are the things I use because they work well together, and I trust them to work like, always the way I want them to work and not have problems. So as Tesla's reputation keeps increasing and they keep taking a larger market share, this is of course going to be, you love your Tesla, and then everybody's buying a bot. What kind of bot are you going to buy? You're going to buy some, you know, Volkswagen bot, or some, what's that company? The guy that's Archer Aviation, what's Figure AI bot that, no, you're going to go for the Tesla one. And then the economies of scales of Tesla being able to mass produce it. You can't become like a successful mass manufacturer of something innovative, like just because you wish it or you have tons of money. It doesn't happen that way. So yeah, Tesla is going to be in the lead for a long time. Maybe China, but seriously, do you want a Chinese bot in your house? I'm not sure about that. I don't want to be, racist or anything, but
Somebody replied to me today. I believe it's below that tweet at the top, and said, I really don't want the image of Chinese robots, Chinese humanoids being imported into the US just doesn't fit well with me, he said. And yeah, I agree with you on
exactly.
that front. Yeah, that would be kind of interesting. So does that mean, though, that China, on the other hand, won't allow Optimus to be imported or built in Shanghai? And they're going to prefer, just like they do with their cars today, they're going to support their domestic production of humanoids in China.
Well, they're allowing Teslas are being sold in China, so Tesla and the Chinese government seems to have a good relationship. I don't know why that would change, but there's also like, we don't know how the relationship between the US and China might evolve over the coming years, so who knows.
Yeah. Any other questions, comments on Optimus? Please request to speak. We have a very strong group of panel speakers today. If you'd like to ask them questions, please request to speak. Lay, welcome back.
Hey, yeah, man. Thanks for having me back. It's great to be here with such great company. How's everyone doing?
Good. What are your thoughts on the question at the top?
So the question is, for those of you who are joining just like me, what gives you confidence that Tesla will develop and scale Optimus bot? Do I have that right?
Yeah, before others like Figure AI.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the biggest one is the data advantage. So I've been talking with quite a few people that work for Tesla's competitors. I work, as you know, I work in the intelligent connected devices space on edge AI in particular, and mostly on the inference side, less so on the training side. And a lot of the robotics companies I'm talking to right now, what they're all trying to do is get cameras on the human head. That is the rate limiting step for training data. And it's really hard to get that. And weirdly enough, Meta actually has an advantage there with their Ray-Ban glasses, although there isn't quite the data feedback loop that you need to label the data. But that is the rate limiting step. And so getting robots in the real world with cameras, gathering the data, labeling the data, that, it's pretty obvious at this point now that Llama 3 came out that foundational models are not the main advantage. It's really the data advantage. So can Tesla, I personally, I believe Tesla has the advantage here because of course they have cars. So they're actually, a lot of their data advantage comes from the vehicles as opposed to the robots. So that's where my confidence comes from. But the real risk for Tesla to lose its advantage comes from these companies that are putting cameras on human heads.
Thank you. Neo.
Yes, so question for this group. In regards to scale, I think after production hell comes service hell. So in regards to Tesla being able to scale Optimus, does this group believe Tesla already has a strategic advantage in regards to service because of the existing Tesla service centers? So as opposed to sending my bot in a box back to the manufacturing site, I can get it serviced by Tesla.
Sounds like Larry agrees with you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, the service centers, and more particularly the remote service capability that they've developed out of their service centers and in remote locations, are a massive advantage, which I hadn't thought of before. So kudos. Yeah.
Yeah, my mom had to replace her side view mirror. She basically all on the app. Like, so I guided her over the phone, you should see something like this, you should see something like that. And she basically scheduled the appointment. The guy showed up, like 10 minutes, the mirror was replaced. So you can imagine, bot, you're having a problem, you go in the app, I don't know, it cracked its, I don't know, the protective plastic shell or something like that. And, Tesla service jumps in 5 minutes, it's replaced, boom, you're set.
Yeah, I agree. A big part of designing for scale is also concurrently designing so it can be taken apart easily. And so as you're trying to minimize assembly time, you're also trying to minimize disassembly time and steps. And very advanced, mature companies in manufacturing understand this, and they consider it at the concept and initial tooling release stage, and they consider it as a milestone that needs to be met in order to release for production tooling. If you're not an experienced company, you're just trying to get a humanoid out there, you've never shipped a product before, these things are afterthoughts. So it's a great call out on the service center itself, but just the ability for it to be taken apart, self-diagnose, to do diagnosis over the air, and the things that Tesla has advanced over the years, they have that in their DNA.
Lauren. Let's do no hands mode. No hands mode, but just don't interrupt each other. Keep your points short, succinct, sweet, and just wait like a couple seconds after somebody's done. Lauren, go ahead.
Yeah, I thought a great illustration of the previous person was talking about like the challenge of getting real human data. And a few months ago, someone posted on X a job listing from Tesla that was for people to wear motion capture suits to help in the training of the robots, but they were hiring for graveyard shift between like 10 at night and 6 in the morning, which implies that they're running guys 24 hours a day in motion capture suits. And it's just a great example of Elon Musk's drive and like how do you keep up with this guy? How many of these AI startups have 24-hour shifts of guys training the robots, on graveyard shift? I just thought it was a great, like say, example of what it would take to catch Tesla.
I couldn't agree more. That is the speed of innovation is the ultimate advantage that Elon's companies tend to have, which is backed by recruiting just an unreasonable number of talented engineers, millions of engineers applying to these companies, selecting the best, and then essentially using them like fuel, right? Like 4 or 5 years of productivity before they burn out. I mean, some people may call it unethical, but if you're trying to save the world, it really is a warlike effort. And there's a lot of I know personally a lot of engineers who want to join that effort.
Luce?
Hello, everybody. So, how can AGI change Optimus timeline to get to the market? That's the question.
Omar?
Well, when Optimus comes to the market, it is going to be before AGI. So I'm not really sure they really relate to each other much. If we did develop AGI, then in theory, you'd be able to have an Optimus bot that was as smart as a human.
Yeah, and also we gotta people throw around the word AGI, but what do you mean by that exactly? Also, what kind of capabilities? Because some very advanced AI model can fail miserably at some very basic tests.
Yeah, Luce asked a really good question, and I agree with Omar's answer too, because I do think AGI is some time away, but there are some optimistic predictions about AGI arriving in the next year or two, and it's hard to forecast beyond that point, I think. Larry?
But it's very interesting to contemplate that Optimus may well contribute significantly to achieving AGI. After all, it will be a real-world robot in a very wide, a very disparate number of use cases, which will add to the knowledge. So, in a very real sense, this may be one of the important tools to contribute towards AGI.
Yeah, a lot of people have talked about the sort of data cliff. You can look at Alexander Wang of Scale, wrote a few posts about this recently. And in order to scale up these models, you need not only a lot more training compute, but a lot more data. And we're getting to the point where we've trained on all the internet, right? That's why you're seeing OpenAI announce all these content deals, announce a deal with Time. But a lot of people have said, look, not everything is on the internet. To really train an AGI, we probably need a much, much higher volume of data, not just the stuff on the internet, but we may actually need to give it a body to walk around, to experience the world, to touch things, to not just think about this in the abstract, but to actually have physical experiences that the AGI can draw from. And the nice thing about real world data is you never run out of it. Every second, there's a new second of real world data created, and it's always unique. So you don't really have that problem on the internet where there's a finite amount of data. As you scale up to millions of robots, you're, having millions of seconds of new reality. And somebody mentioned also other companies training with VR rigs. Tesla's training with VR rigs too. They mentioned that other people that have cameras on the head could be a risk, but nobody really has cameras on the head in a meaningful way yet. I mean, something like the Apple Vision Pro, but people, will barely use that for a fraction of the day. They'll probably be sitting in one place. Maybe something like the Meta Ray-Ban glasses, but that hasn't really emerged yet as something that records all the time. So it's kind of limited there too. I don't think they're collecting people's personal data for training either. So the kind of wearable space is still emerging, but I think what's important to realize is humans wearing VR capture suits does not scale. And that's ultimately not going to be how they're able to, take Optimus to the next level. I think it's kind of, they're really focused on task specific stuff now. long term, it needs to kind of be able to do a lot of general tasks. And I think what that's going to kind of look like is less human data collection, manually collecting data, and more just the robot actually learning from itself. And, for example, AlphaGo became the best Go player in the world by playing against itself. So you really want to find methods of data collection and training that actually scale far better than the human in the motion capture suit long term.
I
Thank
agree with you,
For
Omar.
those of you who just joined, we're talking about the question at the top of your screens. What gives you confidence that Tesla will develop and scale Optimus before others can? And we're kind of, thinking about what a Optimus humanoid future looks like. And we just have Sierra Catalina join as well. Sierra used to work for XAI, training Grok. So great addition to the team of great speakers that we have today. No hands mode, Lauren. No hands mode. Please proceed, Lauren. Go ahead.
Yeah, and just one more point I think we should keep in mind is like even if general AI just became, was solved tomorrow and we had this super intelligence, it's unlikely it would run on the power and compute that's available on the bot. It would probably be something in a data center. So it wouldn't necessarily, rain on Tesla's parade, because obviously you could send certain problems back to the data center, but just the day-to-day, million decisions it needs to make an hour still need to happen on bot with the power requirements that entails.
I would just like to ask really quickly, does this group agree that at this point Optimus is a software problem and not a hardware problem?
It's both.
I think, yeah, it's both. And then you can't, it's too simplistic of a categorization to split it up into the two, because ask yourself the question, okay, if the rate limiting step is the training data, right? Ask yourself the question, is the gathering of the training data a hardware problem or a software problem? You could argue it's a hardware problem in what I was saying earlier, in that you want to have a certain number of cameras on a certain number of human heads, but it's also a software problem in the sense that, whoever has the best model probably wins, right? So it really depends on your perspective. But think about it in terms of the critical path. What is the critical path? And Omar, I agree with you, Omar. For sure, getting robots that self-teach is, I would argue, I agree with you that is the critical path. But what Tesla's proven really good at, that we've seen with full self-driving, is getting hardware out there, gathering the data, and humans paying for it, right? Actually paying for full self-driving. And that's the incremental path that I think I don't quite see yet with robots more generally. And that's what I'm trying to figure out. I know someone's going to crack that code. I just don't know who, and I don't know when. But someone's going to figure out how to do the Cosmo magazine, charge you for the magazine and the advertising at the same time. Someone's going to figure out that, to use a terrible analogy, someone's going to figure out how to charge people for robots that gather a shitload of data or some kind of thing worn on the head. It's not clear what that is.
That's fair.
All right, back to the earlier question, how are they going to do it? They're probably going to do it just like how they did with the Model 3 and the Model Y. Just get a bunch of them in people's hands and then start gathering data after doing that. Now, it's a little different because it's a robot versus a car. Once they're in people's houses and in people's factories doing just a remedial basic thing they programmed it for, additional things can be slowly introduced. And if it's having problems, it feeds that data back to the mother system or back to the headquarters, and they start training on that to try to improve that. And they could either offer features to buyers or the owners of the boss. Hey, if you'd like to have this new functionality, do some basic training for it, and as it becomes more efficient, you can get access to it. Something along those lines.
Yeah, to claim that it's a hardware problem or to claim that it's a software problem is missing the point. The two problems are intertwined. They're deeply intertwined. you're not going to get the software solved until you have a lot of hardware out there. You're not going to get the hardware solved until you got the manufacturing costs down to something manageable, and the hardware functional to a level that is usable. So you really are looking at an integrated problem, much as you are with FSD, and it's probably a deeper problem in the robot than it is with FSD. And finally, it's a cost problem. I mean, unless you get this robot down to a manageable cost, you're not going to get the volume that you need, and you're not going to be the leader in the space with the volume. So you can't point to one thing and say, oh, that's the problem. It's an integrated solution. It's a complete solution, or it's nothing. And so it's a very challenging thing, and it's not going to be easily solved by any one of the 60 plus companies out there that are doing it. And each one are going to have a different approach to the solution. So I think it's more complex than most people think. That's my thought.
If I could quickly refine my question, and I suppose what I meant was, is it a technology problem, or meaning we need to invent new batteries, or is hardware 3, 4, 5 good enough, or is there something that needs to be invented from a hardware perspective to make the bot a success versus technologies we already have? I guess that's what I was thinking about, right? Is there some long pole? And I think we can see a long pole in the tent from a software perspective with perception and time and cognition. Just wondering physically, like, is there any, do we need to make new batteries? Do we need to make better chips? I don't know. I think those problems might be solved.
I mean, obviously, the product itself is a combination of hardware, software, and services. But we've had robot hardware for many years, like you can see, obviously, Boston Dynamics videos. And that isn't to say Tesla isn't inventing a lot of new stuff on the hardware side, new motors, new actuators, new batteries, yes. But you can look at the field of robotics and you can see that we've had robot hardware for many years. What we've actually never seen before is a robot brain that's ChatGPT quality or better, right? That can understand you, that can execute tasks, that moves as naturally as FSD drives, and has the intelligence of a modern state of the art model. So that's the part where no one has ever done it before. So I guess you could say that that is probably the more novel part of the problem. Although Tesla's never made a robot, there is a lot of literature, a lot of other examples you can draw, and you can ask, well, how did Boston Dynamics solve this? Whereas on the softer side, you're really charting a new course.
So my question for you, in terms of training Optimus, what AI models or algorithms are being used to power Optimus decision making and learning capabilities? We talked about humans hired to train them today. At what point do you see that becoming fully automated, it's learning from its own actions? How far out that is that?
Yeah, I mean, I think ideally what you'd want to see, and they've started talking about this already, is the ability of the bot to sort of create its own training data, not necessarily from a motion capture suit, but by watching other people and robots do tasks. So, for example, it should be able to, with a few basic primitives, like, okay, here's how you pick something up, here's how you hold something, here's how you walk. It should be able to figure out ways to combine those skills it has into new things, new things it can do by, for example, watching a YouTube video or watching you demonstrate. For example, you should be able to say, here, look, Optimus, let me show you how to tie a shoe, and show it how to tie a shoe or maybe a new kind of knot. And it should actually be able to remember that and then do it in the future. Or if it sees someone, let's say, making a pancake or something, it should just be able to watch a human make a pancake and then be able to imitate that and do it with the same degree of quality. That would open up a lot more training data where you're not depending on a motion capture suit, but you could just have it kind of browse the web and learn a bunch of stuff.
Sierra, you used to train Grok. What do you think? Do you have anything to add? And if you want to go technical details, you're welcome to do so as well. This group can handle it.
Well, just to kind of ping off of what Omar just said, it's the combination of being able to take visual training data and apply it to real world understanding that I think is really the huge, massive point of difference with Optimus. And we've seen Tesla do this before with FSD using hundreds of hours of YouTube video and then its neural net being able to apply that to real world understanding. So if in the future we can move away from teleoperation trained bots to just feeding it video data and then having it have a good enough understanding of the real world to be able to apply skill sets that it has just watched, it's going to be a massive point of difference.
Thank you. Is anyone on the speaker board would like to offer a timeline when that's going to happen, when Tesla is going to reach that milestone where we no longer need motion suits to train Optimus, to teach it new capabilities, new movements, but instead it's going to learn from watching other robots or a YouTube video or even a human and just learn from those things, because that's a major, major milestone, right, Omar? Would you like to offer, actually, let's start with anyone else who would like to offer a timeline to that milestone.
I can give you a very accurate timeline.
I love it. You have a crystal. What does your crystal ball say?
It says longer.
Long. Okay. So you think it's years out, several years out?
I don't know about years out, but it's going to take a while.
Well, what makes you say that?
I mean, expectations are very high and reality is very tough. I mean, it's very tough. I mean, putting a battery into a case is one thing. Doing the kinds of things we're imagining, or I see imagined every day, is a whole different ball game. So it's going to take a while. It's like FSD. We think it's around the corner, and it's probably still a year away or so, a year, maybe even more. So I think it's just going to take longer.
Well, we have a comment in. Thank you, Larry. We have a comment in YouTube live chat from Nicholas Toledo, and Nicholas says, Sanctuary is doing imitation learning right now. Omar, is that true, or anyone else who is familiar with the company Sanctuary? Are they actually doing imitation learning right now?
What company?
It just says Sanctuary.
Sanctuary AI. Yes, Sanctuary AI is doing imitation learning. Also, Figure One is experimenting with imitation learning. They were able to train their bot to make a cup of coffee just by watching humans make coffee for, I believe it was 20 hours, possibly less than that. So it is being experimented with. Stanford's mobile Aloha also is utilizing a little bit of imitation learning combined with like hard-coded training.
Sanctuary is here. Sanctuary is here in Vancouver, where I live, and a bunch of my former employees work there. So I probably know more than I'm allowed to say. But what I'll tell you is that they've been at it a long time, a lot, way before Tesla started working on the bot. I do think they are the market leader in imitation learning. But I think if you look at their progress, it's been a grind, right? It's really hard.
All right,
yeah,
great.
I've never heard of them before. I mean, imitation learning has been around for a long time, obviously. What I'm really talking about is beyond imitation learning. It's really something that we've never seen before in a consumer product or an industrial product. So I think the key really is here, you have kind of a product vision, which is a humanoid robot with AGI like capabilities. That is to say, it can do anything a human can do. But as Larry says, of course, the reality is today, we've never seen technology like that before. So the key is really going to be, just like with FSD, to figure out a way to launch it in an incremental fashion, deliver some functionality, some usefulness, not obviously a human level intelligence, but find a way to sell a bot, have a software, figure out what it can do, what it can be useful at, and then continue to improve it over time, send out software updates, make it better, have a next, generation version of the hardware, next generation of the training cluster, so on and so forth, and eventually get closer to that vision over time. So that's really going to be the interesting thing, is watching how they kind of do that incremental rollout. They've kind of spelled out the first step, which is using Optimus in their own factories. And they say next year they're going to be doing some production just for their own factories. Assuming it goes well in their factories, then the next step might be other people's factories being able to sell it. Maybe, SpaceX, for example, they could be an easy first customer, right? I mean, I can imagine there's a lot of things they could probably do with those. Maybe launch one into space and have a jump around the moon. I don't know. But then after that, I imagine they start opening it up more to general purpose commercial use cases, as well as, finally, consumer use cases in the home. And that's really, obviously a much higher bar than industrial use cases. But that is kind of, I think, the North Star.
Omar
great.
is exactly right. Omar is right on target. This is exactly why I think it's going to be a little while, but I think it's going to be incremental.
I disagree. I think it's going to be a lot faster than everybody expects. The reason is the power of computers gotten so much stronger, and Tesla's putting a lot of money into building up their infrastructure for supercompute. They got Dojo, and then they got all those H100s from NVIDIA. All that can be used for help training, and I just think it's going to be a lot faster than everybody thinks.
I don't think compute is the rate limiting step anymore. I think it used to be, but now it's so let me be clear about something, right? So I didn't understand this until pretty recently. Basically, once Llama 3 came out, it became really clear that the democratization of foundational models is going to be better than we thought. And basically whoever can afford the GPUs can get the compute they need. So the real advantage that the Magnificent Seven have and a bunch of Asian companies have is data. And I don't mean data lakes. I don't mean like historic data, because that's the low hanging fruit. That's already been picked, right? We've been gorging on data now for a few years to train these models. That era is pretty much coming to an end. The new era is like, how fast can you create the new data and who has access to that data? And so really the way to think about it with Tesla Bot is like, how fast can they get the training data? And I think they can get it pretty fast. Like, I think Tesla is in the best position to do that, but it's still very difficult to imagine. And basically, like, the robots that are in the factories, as you know, things are very rectilinear. Everything's sort of Cartesian in those factories. Like, the battery pack is more or less where you put it on the manufacturing, surface, right? And that's going to be great data, but the next step beyond that is like more ambiguous environments, commercial environments, where the laundry isn't where you thought it was, right? Where the broom isn't where you thought it was, kind of thing.
No hands mode, Larry. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I just want to register my skepticism. I mean, everybody's excited about large language models, and they are great and they're wonderful, but man, they make so many mistakes. And that's fine at the level of play that we have with them right now. In the real world, the code that they write needs a lot of debugging, needs a lot of review. With a robot, that kind of error level can be quite catastrophic. at any serious level. I think we are a lot further down. And I think that, just because we have a fairly large amount, and not that large, but a fairly large amount of compute today, it doesn't make us, invulnerable to the realities of physics. It's going to be a while. That's my judgment. Anyway.
So, kind of the argument on the other side that it'll actually happen much faster than we think is kind of like the argument around the singularity. And Ray Kurzweil has a new book out, The Singularity Draws Nearer. If people know his famous book from back in the day, he predicted that Moore's law would drive the creation of digital intelligence. And a lot of his predictions have turned out to be pretty spot on. He predicted we'd pass a Turing test by 2029 and have AGI by 2045. And that's looking pretty on track, I think. But, the argument essentially is, as someone said in the 50s, a general intelligence is the last invention that man will ever have to make. Because even today, you see these models, and yes, they make mistakes, but as coders, we're now always using these models. We're using GitHub Copilot. We're asking questions to ChatGPT, and it helps us write more code much faster, right? So it's writing more code, it's writing faster. The software is now speeding up the software development process. This is where you get this sort of exponential improvement. And then, if you create an increasing level of intelligence, if you create an intelligence that has the intelligence and performance on tasks like coding the same as a human, then it can also improve itself. And you get into this sort of thing where the thing's improving itself recursively, and you just see insane progress that we can't even imagine. Major breakthroughs in medical technology, science. And I mean, this all sounds a little bit crazy, maybe like smoke a blunt and listen to the audiobook of Ray Kurzweil. It could be kind of mind blowing. But this is kind of one school of thought. And what we're seeing in the industry is the scaling laws that we have seen don't show any sign of stopping. That is to say, more data, more compute, train a bigger model, it's better. And every time they train a model, they go, okay, maybe now it's gonna stop working. It's not gonna be yielding the same results. But no, the models just keep getting better and better. So there is a growing school of thought that we see a takeoff here that's much faster than people expect because the software actually starts accelerating the rate of improvement of the software.
I agree with you wholeheartedly, Mars. Getting back to the other guy saying how he thinks it's longer, I disagree again because even if the technology is not there and the robot's not doing the activities that we're expecting, if it's in everybody's hands and it can just do a little bit, we're all going to want to buy one. I'll want to buy one if it's cheap enough. It can just do a simple task of dusting my cabinets. I'll buy one. And that will help get it in people's hands. And then the data starts coming in faster. And with the incremental improvements in technology and the software building upon itself, it starts becoming an exponential curve.
Okay, great. Okay, let's go to Sierra, then Neil, and then I have a more technical question. I think we should increase the technical understanding of this problem. And I think that will reverberate across the space and then outside the space and then the investor community. We should focus on understanding, like going deeper into, instead of speculating, like deeper into the technical understanding of both the hardware and the software problems. Sierra, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to address Larry's concern over kind of the comparison between hallucinations in LLMs versus vision-based models. So these are very different. And what we're seeing is a marriage of the two, which actually will strengthen the vision models and reduce hallucinations. However, vision models are grounded in truth of real world understanding. So they're far less prone to hallucinations than a large language model, which is based on prediction and pattern of language. So the addition of having the real world understanding makes them far less prone to the type of hallucinations that we see in large language models.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. I couldn't agree more. I think I was really trying to illustrate just how high we have to get up the curve, even though I understand the curve is rising very rapidly. So yeah, I think that the real world model is dramatically more important than the language model. And we see that in the Tesla self-driving capabilities. We've seen the quality of improvement and the rate of improvement, but yet, even though the rate of improvement is quite significantly faster than it's been up to now, even we face, fairly daunting, couple of steps forward to get there. So I've been in software development for too long, perhaps 54 years going on. And so, my past really haunts me because every time I think we're going to get better and we're going to do this in X amount of time, we do it in, 2x time and 3x time and 10x time. So I've read the story before, I've seen the movie several times. That's all that's driving my views. So I'm probably the old man. I'd better step down, let somebody else take over.
No, please stay up, Larry. You're not that old. Neil?
Yes, real quickly, in regards to LLMs and visual neural nets, I'd like to know.
Larry, there's no mandatory retirement age on the speaker board. Neil?
Yes, sir. So I don't know that visual neural nets that are photons in and command controls out are relatable to LLMs, right? Which are just statistical word calculators. I don't know how these two things I don't even know how we could compare them, which is why I believe Elon's going for insane amounts of compute. He may know things we don't, that these visual neural nets with transformers are much more compute intensive than LLMs. So I guess my question is, does anyone know how these two compare? Because LLMs to me seem like something a protocol droid would use as output. It'd be a light neural net on top of a much bigger, more robust system.
There is some overlap between the two. So in particular for simulated data. So one of the ways that Tesla has managed to gain some advantage is in like simulating. They'll find an edge case, right? But they only have one example of it, and then they'll recreate that edge case with simulated data, 10,000 times or something like that. Because it's just too hard to collect that one rare incident where the kangaroo jumped at the back of the vehicle and there was 4 vehicles in a row. You know what I mean? There's a lot of edge cases, right? So there is some I don't know exactly how it works, but from what I understand, there's like a fair bit of LLMs involved now in the creation of simulated data.
We have a good question. Neil, go ahead, sir.
I'm sorry. Yep. I would just ask one other thing. I wonder about the input size for an LLM versus a visual neural net, because when you think about photons in, there's a ton of pixels. I don't know if the input size is different or not, but I'd be interested if anyone knew about input size for a visual neural net with transformers versus an LLM.
Okay. Omar, this question goes for Sierra and Larry, but let me get your perspective on this first, and then we can go to Sierra, Larry. The question is from Ryan in the replies to the space. It is, at what point does energy become a limiting factor? Can we make the leap from AI to AGI without running into the energy headwind?
Well, it's difficult to predict what breakthroughs we might see in the future. But today, training AI models uses an insane amount of energy. So, yeah, energy will actually have to scale up, obviously, with the AGI, both in terms of the AGI used to train it and the AGI, or sorry, the energy used to train it and the energy used to run it.
Yeah, Larry, actually, I had a question just today. Somebody said, even for EVs, let alone Optimus or these data centers that are going up and everything, they said, we don't have the electrical grid to support everyone buying EVs today. And I do understand, solar energy is going to play a big role. Wind is going to play a role. Maybe nuclear is going to play a role as well. But that still takes time to scale up, right? So what do you think? Do you think we're going to run into some sort of a electricity generation bottleneck?
Not for EVs and not for training neural nets. Both those activities can be timed to use energy that can be used, that can be provided. I mean, as long as the sun is in the sky, we have unlimited energy. Now it's just a question of engineering to capture that energy. We've been inefficient in doing that as a civilization, simply because the engineering capabilities of using oil were developed, in an early stage in the Industrial Revolution, and it's been the default and the simple solution. But there's almost unlimited energy available in Earth, and so that's not the limiting factor. The limiting factor is simply the ingenuity and engineering necessary to implement it. I think we'll see gigantic energy uses by Tesla, but they have the nous, they have the skills to be able to engineer that energy into their centers. So I think that's an advantage they have. So I don't see energy as a limiting factor. I just see the engineering of the energy and the skill at engineering that energy as the limiting factor. I don't know if anybody has a different view.
Well,
Would anyone on this? Alex, go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just going to say, like, to touch on what Omar was saying about, we don't know what kind of breakthroughs are here. I see it a little bit like, when Elon basically said, humans drive a car with just like a pair of eyes on a gimbaling head, and we can manage the same thing with 8 cameras driving a car. Well, the same thing is true for intelligence. So our brains basically work on something like 0.3 kilowatt hours a day, and we manage to do amazing things. So at some point there might be a breakthrough in the algorithms and the models that allow us to cut the training compute that's needed to something very reasonable and very efficient. And that's just like maybe one discovery or a few discoveries away, where everything is turned on its head and we don't need that much compute both for inference and training, which our brains does both. Since very young age, we managed to do both in our heads, and with very, very little power consumption.
Yeah, Alex brings up a really good point, which is that we have an existence proof in biology that the state of the art in learning is far, far off from what the physical limits are. You think about this massive data center needed to train one of these LLMs, and you got 100,000 H100s, and it's sucking up hundreds of megawatts of power. And then you compare that to a little baby eating baby food who's able to learn and speak and actually be more intelligent than that massive data center that's using all that energy. So clearly there are many breakthroughs to be had, and there's a lot of capital now going towards finding them, but we're not really sure what they are yet.
Yeah, and it applies both to the compute, but also how much data you need to learn. A lot of humans can learn one shot, 2 shots, examples, and then they figure it out for themselves. Whereas now we need terabytes of data to basically fine tune a certain behavior or be able to acquire a new skill and that's not how it works for humans. So there's obviously like a gap here between where we are and what the bleeding edge of intelligence and learning is to that we see in ourselves, basically.
Yeah, I have no doubt that long term it'll actually be able we'll actually be able to design something that's more energy efficient than a human brain and more powerful. That seems obvious, given a long enough time horizon.
Sierra, what do you think about that?
I'm optimistic that we, especially with the advent of the AI tools that we have available to us, we will solve the energy problem in tandem with the exponential growth. I think that we're already making more energy efficient hardware and we're making models more compact. There's a lot of compression advancements, and I think we're going to have like the JPEG moment where something that was incredibly difficult just becomes easier. I also have a lot of hope that maybe we might find new energy resources with space exploration and asteroid mining and stuff. But the energy problem is not something I worry about much. I think that it'll move in tandem with the growth of the market.
Thank you, Sierra. Just a quick note. I just received a nice tip from Sammy. Sammy, thank you very much for tipping and supporting this space. Omar, question for you. Like I said earlier, I really want to dig into the technical details of both the hardware and the software. So maybe we can start from what programming languages and frameworks are being used to develop Optimus software? And how does that contrast with FSD development?
Yeah, so one point I just wanted to make as an aside is we really don't know how the brain works. Like it's a little bit of a mystery to us. You would think we'd kind of figured it out by now with all the modern technology, but it really is a mystery how the brain does what it does. We really don't get it. So I'm hopeful that Neuralink and projects like that will hopefully, and other modern neuroscience that's happening, will hopefully expand our understanding of the human brain. And maybe that might then guide our engineering efforts. One thing that I think is interesting is actually, just to think about what you're doing, your own mental processes, how your own brain works, and, thinking about how complex it is and thinking, okay, how could we build a machine that could do the same thing? But, in terms of the software stack, it's really pretty similar to FSD today. If it's going to diverge a lot in the future, maybe it will, but it's pretty similar in that they're both vision-based systems. They're both running on the same Tesla FSD computer. So the AI5 that Elon was talking about, more than anything, that's for Optimus, right? That's to give Optimus insane amounts of processing power. So, and it's also going in the car too, so that they have economies of scale that way. But it's the same hardware. The software that runs on it is just a lot of C for the system software. They may be using Rust and other stuff now, more like memory safe languages. But generally, the stuff that's happening at runtime, especially for the cars, is just very low level so they can minimize the latency and just make it respond as fast as possible. So you kind of have a thin C layer, but the bulk of it is just running this model. So they have obviously the trip accelerator and they can train a model and then pass that over to the trip. The way it works is it inferences the whole model on the input and just gives you the result to the CPU afterwards without the CPU having to do anything. So the CPU and GPU are mostly just kind of, doing whatever. And it really is primarily this model that is running and telling the car or the robot what to do. And then you have some C code that takes the output of the model and then actually translates that into moving the actuators, moving the motors in the car, or moving the joints in the robot in the way that the model predicts it needs to be moved. So the software architecture is pretty similar, a lot of deep learning and C. They use a lot of Python in prototyping. They use PyTorch a lot. So yeah, pretty similar stack between FSD and Optimus so far.
Thank you, Omar. We have a couple of other speakers that just joined. And on YouTube live chat, people are letting me know where they're from. And I love that. I love that we have a speaker, listener in Chicago. We have a listener in Norway. You may let me know where you're from in the replies to the X space as well. It helps in both ways. It let me know. It kind of allows me to kind of appreciate this global audience that we have, and also drives engagement in the replies as well, which pushes it out to other people. And I really appreciate that. Thank you, everybody. Danny, go ahead. Danny, you may unmute yourself and go ahead.
Hi. What gives me confidence is that Tesla was always way ahead of the others, so they likely have many years until, for example, a Chinese company takes over. Do you think it will be a Chinese company that not take them over, I mean, that produces a lot for cheap? Do you think it will be a Chinese company, or which player?
Omar, what do you think about that? Is there a Chinese threat to Optimus project?
Absolutely. I mean, China is the manufacturing capital of the world. And it's not just about low cost labor. It's about a supply chain. It's about when you're in Shenzhen and you need a new type of integrated circuit printed, or a new type of screw, or a new enclosure. You can go walk outside and find 50 different suppliers within walking distance who will make that part for you right then and there. No calling the supplier in China and waiting a few weeks to get it. You just go over there, you get the part. The rate of innovation, the supply chain is just unmatched there compared to anywhere else in the world. So one would think that you would have extremely high quality, low cost robots coming from China. As a matter of fact, they're already making robots and exporting them in many cases. They're selling robots to restaurants. Simple robot on wheels that can take food on a tray and wheel it over from the kitchen to the table. Stuff like that. It's being sold around the world already by Chinese companies. And I think there's even a Chinese humanoid company who already has one for sale, and it's like $16,000 or something like that, which is a pretty good price. So yeah, I mean, you would expect that, and China necessarily isn't always the one to create a product category, but once the product category has been established, they copy it like nothing else, and often even make it better and cheaper. So I would expect China to be a major player in the humanoid robotics market.
Well, you said the keyword supply chain, so that makes me, now I have to go to Jeff Lutz, who is our supply chain expert. Jeff, how would you compare the supply chains in China versus US in the context of humanoid robots?
Yeah, no, I think Omar did a good description. It's all about network latency. Everything is there. And that time or that latency is the time, from when you send that database out or you order that part and you receive, your design back, you receive your feedback, or you receive your part physically. And in China, you'll have the lowest network latency, you have the most tooling capability, you have the most raw fabrication capability of any component type you want. So it's really going to be around these specialized actuators. The design and manufacturing of them is going to be critical, and there's a number of critical problems that have to be innovated on and solved. For example, liquid ingress, like how are you going to solve that for the robot? It's a different challenge than the vehicle. You think about things like hyperextension of the joints. These are all major engineering problems that have to be solved and supply chain problems. They'll turn into supply chain problems that have to be solved. But yeah, in the US used to have this capability back in the even as recent as the late 90s, early 2000s. You had that capability. You had the tooling capability, you had the assembly capability, you had all that, and it literally, is mostly evaporated. But that doesn't mean that it could not come back in some form, but it will probably take a period of time.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other comments from the speaker board on that front? You're welcome to unmute yourself and go ahead. We have AT on the board. AT has been on the board for a little bit, but I don't think he got a chance to speak. AT, go ahead. AT, you may unmute yourself and go ahead.
I'm sorry. No, I was just earlier on the hardware versus software problem is what I was gonna weigh in
go ahead.
on.
That's fine.
All right. I guess for me, I feel like it's fairly obvious it's both. It's just when you look at Boston Dynamics, they were, at least from my viewpoint, they were really focusing on the hardware. They were showing what it's capable of, what it could do someday. It can do flips. It could be a soldier someday, kind of thing. But they didn't have the brain, and so I think the processing, the compute, are a big part of the hardware that was needed that we have access to now. And then I think also the power density of the batteries were a problem before, but now that seems to be something we've kind of got solved across the industry. So not that big of a deal there anymore. And really, I don't know why I see everybody so concerned about the actuators. Obviously for maybe doing larger tasks, sure, but a lot of those things are going to be large single arm robots that already exist, or excavators, machines, large things. As for the humanoid robot, I mean, people with disabilities do things you wouldn't believe they could do for themselves with no arms. They do it with hooks for hands. Like, I don't think that hardware problem of articulation was ever really about the hardware. It's about, do we have the processing power behind the decision making to make do with what we've got?
Interesting. I mean, I think Omar would probably agree with everything you said there. Omar, would you?
Yeah,
AT
I
is
agree
not
for the
concerned
most
about
part.
the hard. Yeah, AT is not.
I mean, the
Okay.
hardware is a really tough problem too. So I don't want to minimize that. But he's right that the brain is what's been missing.
Yeah, I wanted to kind of bring this group of experts and convince the listeners and the investor group beyond that Tesla will get there. But you guys have been just pointing to hardware problems, software problems, and I'm being convinced that this is going to take longer, like Larry said, than I had imagined. We're kind of doing the opposite of what I initially started to do.
Well, I think it is something that needs to be done incrementally. You hope for the best, but you prepare for the worst. You try and get it out as soon as you can. And also, expanding FSD is part of the learning process too. They have millions of cars out there already. They can deploy that technology much faster, whereas they're still finalizing the hardware design of the robot. So, it's going to happen in stages over time. It's not necessarily going to happen overnight, and there's execution risk. They may fail. Someone else may do it better. They may not be able to offer it at a value proposition that justifies the cost. So it is obviously sort of a nascent business right now. There's $0 in revenue, but you look at the track record of the team, and there's reason to believe that we should take it seriously. And then you just kind of start to think about, okay, if it works, and you look at where technology is going, it's clear that it is going to work at some point. And then you think about this product category, and Elon's right. It makes the auto business look like peanuts by comparison. So why would we not leverage everything that we've invested in creating FSD to also create a humanoid? What do we really have to lose there? That's kind of how I think about it. And I also really think about it as kind of one and the same. I find it to be really complementary with the FSD business. Many things that we want FSD to do, such as deliveries and other tasks, it's really going to need to be paired together with an Optimus. So we really need both of them, and we need them to both continue to improve over time. So it's really a 10-year vision for the company that he's laid out here in terms of, okay, when is every corner of the world going to have autonomy? Not just the United States, but you could go to Africa or, South America and actually see robotaxis running there too. That's a pretty long time horizon, right? And okay, how long until every home around the world has a robot in it? That's, kind of a 10-year thing or more. So really this is a very long-term vision of the company, but if it is executed well as a strategy, you're not hopefully waiting decades and decades to see earnings grow. You're seeing them hopefully monetize incrementally in their factories, in commercial settings, figuring out some way to make an MVP out of it, and to continue to drive progress in the product category over that time horizon.
That's awesome. Thank you, Omar. So I expect to see everybody in here talk about Optimus for the next 10 years, every single day. We're going to incrementally discuss the potential, and we're going to track Tesla's progress for the next 10 years. By the way, Tesla Live has been around for about 2 years now, which is amazing. So we have a bunch of questions about FSD. This is a half hour warning. We have half hour to go. Sierra has been replying to this space with examples of existing humanoid projects from different companies. You can go to the replies and check those out. People have been letting me know where they are chiming in, tuning in from. We have a listener, Joshua from Alabama, Gabrielle from Italy, Labex from Canada, and really appreciate it when people let me know. Rich Bira from Chicago. This is pretty cool, really cool. All right, Omar, we have a question about FSD 12. Where is 12.4.2? When is it coming? I think Elon replied a couple of times, right? What's the latest on that?
Yeah, really, really excited about this going out to people. I think it is the first time FSD is really FSD. And it's really just a different experience using it hands-free. The driving model's so good now that it almost always works without intervention. You're kind of surprised when it even requires an accelerator press. And it's actually gone out to some people internally to Tesla yesterday. I've confirmed, and from what I've heard, it is looking good. It's hesitating less. And I would expect it to go out to wave 1 tonight. That means a broader group of Tesla employees, your showroom employees, your service center employees even qualify for that program. And then by this weekend, if there's no major issues, I would expect it to start rolling out to customers. And I'm expecting it to go a little bit wider than the previous release. That is to say, new people who are on 12.3.6 will be brought onto 12.4.2. This is obviously a major change to the driver monitoring system. I expect it to be a frustratingly cautious rollout, but if all goes well, I think we'll be seeing some software update notifications this weekend.
That's awesome. Thank you very much for the updates. Is there anyone else other than Omar on the speaker board who has 12.4.1 and can speak to their experience? If you have 12.4 variant, please request to speak and share with us your experience. Larry, what do you think about FSD take rates? And you know pretty much as much as everybody else here on the speaker board about 12.4 and the fact that it does not have steering wheel nags. Do you think it's going to increase the take rate in the near future?
Good question. I don't think it's going to have an immediate impact on the take rate because the nag has been taken away. I think it's going to increase the delight level. I think the take rate, the rate of increase of the take rate is going to be when, we have a fairly broad consensus that we have, hands-off situation with very few interventions. I think when that excitement starts bubbling up, and it could be with 12.4.2, but you may need another revision or two. I think that's more important for the take rate. I think having that happen and not having the nag is going to be important, but I don't see not having the nag itself being the catalyst.
Thank you, Larry. Danny?
If Tesla executes really well with Optimus, could it manufacture itself and cancel out the advantage that China has with manufacturing right now?
Danny, delivering again on the topic thing. I heard somebody come off mute. Omar, was that you?
No, but I do think that hands-free FSD is actually the catalyst. There's no system right now that's a hands-free system that works on both highways and city streets, where you can just do whatever you want with your hands. You don't have to touch the wheel. And I think that I would really be shocked if you didn't see the subscription rate and purchase rate increase at least somewhat as a result of this. The free autopilot that comes with the car is good enough for most people. So, going to FSD, it's kind of like, okay, well, most people don't really use it on the city streets that much. Now everybody who uses a Tesla and uses highway autopilot, which is pretty much all Tesla users, they have a reason to subscribe, which is that you can go hands-free on the highway. And what they're going to find is that after the highway, it gets off and just continues driving, just like they're used to on the highway. And they're going to say, wow, I'm hands-free. It's doing the entire thing for me. Everyone will experience a zero intervention drive, at least at some level. And they'll continue getting updates. They're going to activate, actually smart summon. They're going to activate banish. Auto park is getting really good. You're going to see the take rate start ticking up. I mean, taking away the nag and turning this into a hands-free system is arguably, the biggest feature change ever. I mean, this is really the significant milestones, the moments at which we're taking away responsibility from the user. It's okay, you have to hold the wheel and you have to watch the road and you have to be buckled in. Okay, now you don't have to have your hand on the wheel all the time. Next, they'll say, okay, you don't have to watch the road at certain times. Maybe if you're on the highway in a traffic jam, the cabin camera turns off. And then they're going to keep expanding that until suddenly we don't have to do anything and we can be asleep in the back seat. So these are really the moments where you're granting the user freedom. You're allowing them to have their hands back. And it doesn't sound like a big deal, but it's maybe the most significant update ever since I've bought a Tesla.
Can I just add that to
Yeah.
all that Omar has said right now? I think, like, first of all, like I got used to the nag. It took me a few tries, and just basically I was resting my arm on the windowsill, and I was just giving it a bit of resistance whenever it was moving. And it didn't feel bad for me, but for my mom, it was like a deal breaker. And when Elon announced at the shareholder meeting that every major upgrade, they'll offer 2 weeks free to every Tesla owner, I think that is going to increase massively the take rate. Because, like, for example, for my mom, like the steering thing was like, it would make her freak out. Like, what am I doing wrong? What am I doing wrong? And after 30 days, she still didn't manage to get a hang of it like correctly. So I think that 2-week free trial at every like major FSD update, that will be huge, both for Tesla user FSD take rate, but also for Tesla to get those, that data that they need to keep the March of Nines going, those corner cases that they're looking for to make like better versions.
Thank you. Tim Hundley.
Thanks very much. I'll just ask that I'm a shareholder. I'm a Model Y owner for the last 17 months. I'm pro everything. But I'll ask this before I even get into it. Do we even want to get into experiences with 12.3.6 that are not optimal?
Well, there's many things that 12.3.6 doesn't do well. Obviously, it's not fully self-driving, autonomous driverless software yet. So that's why they're doing 12.4 and 12.5 and 12.6.
Yeah, I'd love to get my hands on something better. And well, just let me make a short. I just want to ask before I start getting into it. But I literally 2 or 3 days ago, just got back from 3,800 miles from Wisconsin to Yellowstone, Yellowstone back to Wisconsin, 2 weeks. And a lot of this is highway driving. And I spent my 30-day trial mostly here in Wisconsin, and yeah, I really like a lot of it. I really like 12.3.6. I like I like a lot of it. But there were a few issues, and there were a few things, and you do have that button when it does not do what it's supposed to do. You do have the button where you can send the feedback. I mean, to the point where the thing that bothers me the most, and I just heard you say it again, Omar, and that's where, and I heard Elon say it, 0 interventions in a year. And I heard you say it 0, it sure wasn't my experience. And I mean, I had freeway stuff where where I exit off of the freeway to come back from seeing one of my grandkids to come to my house, it would never take the exit. It signaled, and you could see it on the screen that yes, it knows it needed to go right. It signaled to go right, but the car just continued to go straight. So I had to make a herky jerky and step on the brake and at the last second swerve over. Not a real good move. There was lots of things like that happened on 12.3.6. So if somebody, I have other things.
Yeah,
I'm
I
not
mean,
a
I
big.
hear you. I think what you're describing is a pretty typical experience. When Elon was talking about, 1 intervention per year, he was talking about some far future, 12.6 type update. That's not what you should be expecting with 12.3.6.
Yeah, I
In
hope so.
particular,
Yeah.
the highway stack still hasn't been moved over to the new end-to-end model. So what you're seeing on the highway is still kind of the old FSD 11 stack, so to speak. Now with FSD 12.5, they're actually going to be training an end-to-end model for the highway. So you should hopefully see a big improvement in highway driving there with 12.5 once that's out, maybe in a month or so.
Yeah. And Tim, the other thing, we have to move on because we have other hands as well. But the other thing, there's a good reply from John Ross. When Elon says 0 interventions is measured differently by Elon and Tesla, they talk about safety critical versus most of us mean literally anytime we don't like what it's doing, even though it's not safety defined by Tesla. All right. Jeff, I think you had your hand up earlier. Did you want to say something about it?
Yeah, I was just gonna ask, Omar. I think there was an exchange between you and Elon on 12, like you're basically saying, I'm waiting for, can't wait for 12.4. And he was talking about, I think about like the balance of safety and, and I was wondering, what do you think that was that referring to the attentiveness of the cabin camera and how you've got to keep your eyes glued to the road and kind of like the sensitivity of that? Or do you think there's actual, bugs that they've got to work through in 12.4.2 in terms of, the way, the car actually getting into, safety critical interventions, or maybe a combination of both?
Well, it's typical to see more safety critical interventions when an update is new. So you have kind of like, you could call them bugs in the model. And a lot of times you don't really discover them until you kind of put it out in the real world a little bit. And then you have to do some fine tuning on the model, try and get it to not exhibit those undesirable behaviors. So I think this is just a new process for them. And it's not as sort of deterministic as the old code, right? It's always just sort of going to behave the same way. I think doing these full retrains of the model and putting them out and doing all the validation steps around that so that you don't have an increase in safety critical interventions is something that they're still learning to do. That's pretty challenging. I mean, when we talk about like a full model retrain, this is like when you see GPT-4 or GPT 3.5 or GPT-3, we're talking about like that class of improvement where you're doing a full ground up retrain of the model, often with new data, new techniques. And they're doing this like every month, right? Where I think their goal is like every 2 weeks, but realistically, they're getting out every month or so. So the pace of sort of updates they're doing is kind of staggering. And I think they're kind of just hitting up against the reality that you do need to test it a lot and fine tune the model based on some of the feedback you're seeing to get it to a place where it is having the number of nines of reliability you need.
Neil.
Thanks.
12.4 question for Omar, actually, two. One, do you wear sunglasses? And two, how many strikes do you have?
I don't wear sunglasses and I don't have any strikes. With the new system in 12.4, your strikes only last for 7 days too. So you can't have a bunch of strikes that pile up until you finally get 5. You actually have to have 5 strikes within a week. So if you get a strike, next week your strike will disappear. So it's a much more friendly system, not just on the nag, but also on the strikes.
Jimmy. Oh, Jimmy just dropped. All right, 10-minute warning, guys. 10-minute warning. Any other questions, comments? Please request to speak. Jimmy?
Hey, sorry, I have internet problems at my house this week. I was gonna say every car is different on FSD. It's been my experience. My wife's car drives completely different from my car. My car drives completely different on FSD than my friend's car, even though we're on the exact same version. So I'm wondering if there's anything that has to do with like camera placement or camera configuration or something like that, because our experiences are vastly different. And when my wife told me that like, FSD is constantly nagging, like all the time, it's like, well, just pay attention to the road. And then I got in her car and I was like, oh my gosh, you're not joking. Like, I am paying attention, and every 20
Yeah.
seconds we get nagged.
Jimmy,
And I was
you're
like, this is a terrible experience.
right.
Like,
Jimmy, your connection is cutting off. Omar, do you have an answer for that?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to explain his anecdote without taking a look at the cars. It is possible there could be issues with the hardware of certain cars. Perhaps the cameras aren't calibrated. Perhaps, there's some issue with the suspension or the control or something that could be creating different behaviors. But, typically I've driven many different cars and many different car models, and I found that they perform similarly. there have been situations I noticed where at times the Model 3 was able to make the lane change over and get onto the highway, but the Model S wasn't. The vehicles do have different properties lengthwise and size-wise that can affect the driving, but generally the goal is for every car to behave the same, and for the most part they do behave pretty similarly.
Omar, I would just add one thing. Check your settings, because some people have different settings on their FSD, and you'd be amazed at the difference that it makes. So make sure you and your wife have the same settings.
Yeah,
Jimmy?
so you have chill, average, assertive. You can pick if you want your car to be more aggressive driver or a more relaxed driver.
Yeah, and we have a bunch of replies that are saying calibrating the camera makes a positive difference. I'm sure Jimmy has tried all of those things. Jimmy, have you?
Yeah, all the settings are the same. We've recalibrated. I think what the big actual issue is, and again, it is anecdotal, just like you said, but I believe it's the height of the cars. Because my Model Y sometimes performs much better than my Model 3 because the cameras are up higher, because it's a higher standing car. And then, like you said, sometimes in a Model S, it might behave. I believe it's just because of the camera positioning. It would be fun to do an experiment on the field of view per camera, per car, and actually analyze them and next to each other and say, hey, we have a wider field of view on this car because of the 2 inches in height difference or
Jimmy,
the angle.
Yeah, that doesn't compute. I have a Model X and a Model 3, and both drive almost exactly the same in FSD. And I switch between them. So
I'd love to figure it out.
I'd look to cameras and calibration and maybe have service check your cameras. But I had vastly different experiences before and after a camera calibration. I'm in Iowa, and our first experience with the beta here not too long ago was one of the worst experiences I've had, even going as far back as original autopilot. It did something that I'm like, that didn't feel safe. But then we recalibrated, and I've had, I think, every drive has been zero intervention other than, some pedal presses because it's kind of being too hesitant, or it wanting to change lanes when you wouldn't,
Thank you, AT. Tesla stock. We have 7 minutes to go to the close and also the close of the space. Tesla stock is up 0.5%. Someone in the replies told me that Ryan told me that there's a potential close above 200-day average, moving average. For those of you who are technical analysis inclined. Luce, I believe, has a question on Optimus. Luce, go ahead.
Yeah, so why is data so important for Optimus? Why can't Optimus be trained primarily on simulations and tokens? When it understands its surrounding, it's not a matter of understanding where the table is, where the chair is, and stuff like that. Why can't it just be trained on simulations?
Omar?
Well, maybe it can. I don't know. I think
maybe they are using some simulation. Right? I mean, we don't know.
I'm
that,
sure
right?
they are using at least some simulation. Yeah. I mean, I don't know how to train the robot.
I think simulation training is very important from the perspective of the rate at which you want it to learn. Observation versus simulation. I mean, I think you need both in order to actually, have the thing scalable. That's a key issue, and you need both methods of training, really, for specific use cases. So it's use case specific. I did want to add one thing. Somebody said, "Why is it a mechanical problem? Everybody knows how to make motors." Yeah, they do. The problem is nobody knows how to make transducers at the price that will make the bot affordable right now. The bot bills of materials are running between $100,000 and $250,000 per bot. That has to be at $10,000 to $20,000 per bot, and that's really the focus of the engineering teams. Those numbers are coming down quite quickly, but right now they're very high.
Yeah, and it's also the capability of each motor, having it just be able to do what it needs to do, not more, not less,
Yeah,
and be easily serviceable, all these things, and have the right, lifespan, and all these things are taking into account. That's why Elon said it's not available on the market right now. They have to custom make everything.
bingo. Yeah.
Yeah. Very good, guys. Hey, Omar, I also want to ask you, we have a couple minutes left, but I want to ask you about the tonight's election debate. Are you going to be watching it? And I wonder if we should have a space for those people who are just not want to watch the debates of nonsense on CNN. I can start a space right at the time the election debate starts if you guys want to. But what do you guys think about all that, our speakers?
Yeah, I'm definitely going to watch it. I think really this is the EV election. It's really coming down to a lot of the states that are pivotal in EVs. And I think it's going to become a big issue potentially. I think there's a good chance that EVs and energy policy are mentioned in the debate tonight. So I'm going to check it out. I think it'll also be entertaining, given what Trump and Biden are like. I think it'll be a low point for this country, but I'll be watching. I'll be tweeting about it. Maybe we could do a space after and talk about it. But also, people have such strong opinions, and both of these guys are idiots. But there's, everyone getting their panties in a twist about, people take it so personally. So, I think it's good to kind of focus on the fact that we all love EVs and stuff like that, and not necessarily which of these two idiots is better.
What time is the debate?
It's at 9:00 Eastern, 6:00 California time.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah,
maybe
so
we
do
can
a space and we'll kumbaya on EVs, Yaman.
Should we do a space? I mean, I can start it maybe like earlier because after 9 it's gonna be past my bedtime. And
what?
Maybe past Joe Biden's bedtime too.
That's only 8:00 Texas time.
Yeah, well, so 9 that would finish at like what 11, right? So
Are you
after that
taking
would be too late.
Bidenica?
Yeah, no, I'm not taking anything. But I am an early sleeper. I'm a morning person. That swimming career kind of screwed me for life. Or those 5 a.m. practices.
Yeah,
Getting
getting
go
up
ahead.
to have coffee with this guy is, it's
Yeah, exactly.
thank you.
Exactly. I miss our coffee chats, Larry.
I'm coming up on 8/8. I'm coming up on 8/8.
All right.
And earlier if IFT5 happens earlier, but I'll see you
All
soon.
right.
I'll see you soon.
Okay, great. I brought up earlier Grant because Grant asked a really good question yesterday, and we didn't get a chance to talk about it. And then it kind of got clipped and mocked and everything. So I want to ask him to ask his question again. But apologies to Grant, we ran out of time. So maybe tomorrow we can talk about it. Well, thank you very much, everybody, for joining. It's been a great discussion today. And I hope to revisit this topic again. We're going to focus more on Optimus and FSD. It's a very, very important topic, and we have a great set of speakers. Thank you very much for today's discussion. I will chat with you guys next time. Take care.